Hello, everybody. I'm going to be going through this in class. However, I thought it might be good to record my prep, and that way that can be used as reference. So the next project is building out an environment in Unity. And I'm going to start off with the Skybox, and there are a couple different ways to approach this. One of them is a procedural Skybox. When you open a new Unity project, the default Skybox is a procedural Skybox shader that does not require any input textures and instead generates a Skybox purely from the property set in the material inspector. So I'm going to go to the Unity Hub. I'm going to create a new project, and I'll name it Skybox terrain demo. And that already exists. So 0. And it's going to be a 3D core. So actually, before I move on, I should point out that the procedural Skybox is not available in high definition render pipeline, HDRP. It is available with the 3D core, and it is available for the universal render pipeline. And again, the universal render pipeline is designed to easily export across different platforms, from mobile to desktop. Whereas a high definition render pipeline would be something that you'd probably want running on a tower. So I'll go ahead and create this project. And maybe pause. All right, so I have a new project open. There's a sample scene, the main camera, and directional light. And in the distance, you can see a procedural skybox, procedural skybox. I already had my lighting panel open, and this is where I would set under environment. Right now, there's the default skybox. So if you go to window and rendering and lighting, that's what will open the panel where you can set up a new skybox. So in my assets, I'm going to go ahead and create a new material. I'm going to call this procedural skybox. And I'll go to my inspector. So this material, the shader is set to standard, but I want it to be a skybox. So I'm going to change the shader to procedural. There's 6-sided, cube map, panoramic. So if a panoramic would be based on a 360 image, for example. I've never tried this, but maybe a 360 video. We're going to look at 6-sided as well. But for now, I'm going to set this to procedural. And once I set it's procedural, I have different options: sun, none, simple, high quality. And for now, I'll leave it as high quality. Sun size convergence, atmospheric thickness, sky tint, ground exposure. So let's make a few changes to this. I'm going to bring down the ground, or really kind of bring down the exposure. Sorry. I'll just set it to 1. And the lighting will change all of this. Atmospheric thickness. You can see the changes as I try this out. Try different settings. Sun size convergence. And it will be better to test it. I'll leave it at the default, which is 5. And the sun size, I'll also leave at the default. But I'm going to try a different sky tint. and give it a reddish purpley, reddish sky, and the gray of the ground is going to bounce off of that. Ground doesn't really matter because I'm going to build a terrain eventually. And now I have this procedural skybox set up. For now, rather than a terrain, I'm just going to create a 3D object and create a plane and have it be 100 by 100 by 100 meters. Nice and large. And I'm going to go back to lighting for this scene. And rather than the default skybox, I can just drag my procedural skybox here or use the target and have it applied. And if I test it, we get this type of skybox. Now, I'll save this. And next, I'm gonna introduce a 6-sided skybox. So I have some files already set up for this, which I'll be posting. These are dark and stormy. These are from, there was a site, I'm not sure if it's still up, but there was, if you search around for free skyboxes, you'll find plenty of options out there. And I'm just going to open some of these. So they're all square, and these are 2048 by 2048 pixels. And they're named so that I renamed them because it's easiest to see exactly where they belong on the 6-sided skybox. So when I talk about a 6-sided skybox, this is an example of the setup. There's, it basically becomes a cube, think of it as an open cube, and you assign these different textures to each side of the cube, and then the user is on a ground that is surrounded by this cube. Each of the sides will need to be clamped so that there is no seam from one side of the cube to the other side of the cube. So I'm going to go ahead and drag these skyboxes. Actually, I have another set here that's a lot smaller, and these were generated from a website. I'm going to bounce over to that. So under in the syllabus, under technical or under assets, textures and images, there's sky and 360 image. Those are photographic. Space skybox generator, and this is on the Unity Asset Store, Skybox series free. So the one that I just mentioned is from this developer who created this Space 3D, quickly generate procedural 3D space scene skyboxes in your browser with WebGL. So they're procedural maybe within the browser, but you can set it up here. There's different settings. You can turn off the sun if you want to, which actually would probably make sense for what I'm doing. And you can, there's a lot of different layers that you can turn off. You can also turn off the animation speed. So let's see, I'll leave it. You can turn off the bright stars, and you can download these once you change the settings. All right. So if I look at those in my Finder and my downloads, bounce over to downloads and take a look at this. And I have they provide a cube map, PNG, but then there's bottom, top, right, left, back, and front images ready to go. There's no sun in this one. So one thing that you can do with the Skybox is use the, let's see, go back to Unity, use the main camera, or not the main camera, the directional light as a sun if you wanted to. You know, yeah, it would be, we'd make some changes to it, but we could also add a script so that it's a revolving sun around your environment. So I'll go ahead and drag, not that one, but I'll drag down maybe 2 versions of this, dark and stormy, and the one from that site. Okay, so I'm going to pop out into Inspector and create, and I'm going to create a new Skybox. So I'll go to create material. Create material. There it is. And I'll call it space. So this material, once again, I want to change it to Skybox, and I'll have it be 6-sided Skybox. As soon as I do that, we have options here: tint, color, exposure, rotation. So I'm going to go ahead and use the ones from that. Access it through this column over here from that site. So front, I can just go ahead and drag it over. Back, left, right, and this one you can see that it has a sun with it. So unlike the one that I just downloaded. Top will be up and bottom is down. Okay. So that should be set up. I can go back to my lighting, and I'll click into the environment tab and go ahead and drag my new Skybox there. So you can see that, let's zoom out of here. There's sun, and this new Skybox is available. Great. And if I test it, see what it looks like. Great. Now, I can't walk around or anything, so maybe I will set up a first-person controller. So in order to walk around the space and the environment and see what you're creating, I'm going to use Unity's own starter assets first-person character controller. There's lots of other character controllers available in the asset store. Maybe we're just doing a quick FPC search. There's your advanced first-person controller for $16. There's a bunch of different, there's like a super character controller that I think is free. Yeah, I've used this one before. Super character controller, and it comes with all sorts of options as far as, you know, besides walking and jumping and running. You can, yeah, I think you can make it fly, etc. So I'm going to stick with the one from Unity itself. And I know that if you've been doing the Unity in Action book, you built a first-person controller from scratch, first by controlling where to look using the mouse, and then using the WASD or arrow keys to move about. So that's really great for learning. And you could just as well use that one. However, I'm gonna go with what happened to it, with Unity's own character controller that uses the Cinema Machine tools to kind of create, it comes with a camera that Unity has developed over the last few years. So I already, bouncing back to Unity, I already downloaded this. I can open in Unity and it will open my package manager. So it's inside my assets. I searched for it under Unity registry, thinking that it would be there since they develop it, but I didn't find it there. So, so I had to search for it in the online asset store. So I'm going to go ahead and import it into this project. So this is starter assets, first person character controller. And this is so that we can start moving around the environment and seeing from a user's perspective how the environment is looking when I test a project. So I will let that download. Okay, I downloaded the starter assets with that FPC. There was a warning saying that the input engine would be reset. So just click OK to that and you'll have this folder. I also cleaned up my assets and created a Skybox materials folder that has the procedural and the space Skybox. And I also, rather than just creating a general textures directory, I created a texture just for Skyboxes, since I have a couple different ones here. And maybe I'll leave with this. I'll stay with the space one for now. So the starter assets, in it, there's a series of folders, and the input system is the reason that that I got the warning. If you use this, you'll get a warning that you'll want to click OK to. So first person, there is an example scene. I'll jump over to that scene. And here you can see the setup of how to get this thing going. Actually, if I hit play, there's an environment here and can walk around. Okay, so looks like it's looking now. So the pieces that are required to get the FPC going are the main camera, inspector. The main camera, you can see it has a camera, default camera component, but there's this Cinema Machine brain, and the Cinema Machine brain is tied to this player follow camera. So the player follow camera is also part of this Cinema Machine engine to get a first person controller going. And then there's a player capsule, which is right there. So the player camera root is just an empty game object that has a coordinate 1.375. And that's to create as if the camera was at the head level of a character for the user. And then the capsule, which is meter by a meter by a meter. So these are each prefabs. So prefabs are game components that are either generated by scripts or are going to be used over and over and over. And when you create a game object in your scene and you add different scripts and different components to it, and you plan on reusing it, or you plan to have a script generate it, then once you've created it, you'll want to drag it into your assets folder. Ideally, in the assets folder, you'll have created a prefabs folder, and you'll see the color of that game component, that game element, change from white, like this lighting, to blue, and that visually tells you that it's a prefab. And so I'm pointing this out because this is the setup: main camera, player follow camera, and player capsule. And we're going to want to use the same three prefabs in our scene. So I'm going to go back to the sample scene, and I'm not going to be using the main camera. I could turn this off or delete it. In fact, I'll just go ahead and delete it. And I'm going to go into the starter assets and first person and prefabs. So from here, I'll go ahead and set up the main camera, the player follow, and the player capsule. So let's see, main camera, player follow. Okay, so I have to tell the player follow camera what it's following. So the thing that it's following is this player camera root. So I'm going to want to connect these two by where it says follow. I'll go ahead and connect it to player camera root. And now that should be it. That should set it up. If I wanted to, I could set up an empty game player and put these all in one. But first I'm going to test this, make sure that it's working fine. Okay, so I'm looking around, great. And I am moving, but it doesn't look like it because I haven't put any objects or elements in there. It looks like there's a seam right there. So yeah, I can see the seams of the cube that are making the skybox. So I'm gonna fix that. Okay. So before I do that, I'm gonna create an empty game element in my scene. I'll call it FPC, first player controller, and I'm going to take these and put them all inside the FPC. Let's see if it still works fine. And it looks like it does. So I'll escape that. Okay. Now, one thing I forgot to do is with these skybox textures, if I go back to these, where it says wrap mode, it's repeat. I don't want it to repeat. I want it to clamp. And I'm gonna have to apply that. And I can do it with all of them at once by selecting the first one and shift click, and I'm gonna have them all have a wrap mode clamp and apply. And hopefully that on the fly updates the skybox itself. Let's see, Skybox materials. It's this one. Let's do. Okay, I'm going to test it and see if those are still, if we can still see the seams. Nope, I don't see the seams, so I think I'm okay. I'm going to escape this and pause it. All right, so rather than having a static Skybox, I'd like it to rotate, and I'm going to create a script to do that. So first I'm going to create a new folder, call it scripts, and in it, I'm going to create a new C# script. And I'll call this rotate sky. Okay, so I'll go ahead. It should by default add the .cs for C#. As you can see here, asset scripts rotate sky.cs is the extension. And when I downloaded Unity, it by default should come with Visual Studio, Microsoft's Visual Studio, and it comes with the Unity engine. Mono behavior is the name of the Unity. Mono behavior is the name of the Unity engine. So when you create a new script and name it, it generates a class, which is going to be a collection of commands that are all self-contained, and it's recommended that you keep your scripts as simple as possible for specific behaviors, and you can add multiple scripts to any game object, but the more concise you keep your scripts, the better. So this rotate sky, I don't need the void start. Start is called before the first frame update, because the script is just going to be updated throughout the time that the application's running. So first thing I'm going to do is create a public variable, and it's going to be a floating number variable, and I'll call it rotate speed and give it an initial value of 1.5 f for float, and semicolon to end that line. So when you create a variable, by making it public, it means it's going to be available in the inspector when you add this script to a game object. And then you need to declare what type of variable it is. This is a floating number variable, and you have to give it a name. And then I'm going to assign it a value. So it has an initial value. And now I'm going to go to the void update block, and I'm going to add render settings. And since mono behavior is logged in, all these different options already come up. So sometimes it's really great because it's a lot less typing. Other times it pops in something that you don't want it popping in. So yes, Skybox is what I'm targeting, and I'm going to set its float. Which of these things am I, I don't want to change the position or scale, but the rotation. So I'm setting the rotation, and I'm going to set it throughout the time of gameplay, and multiply it by my variable rotate speed. And it's using the Unity engine. These two, these are called namespaces that have a collection of available commands that you can use. And I'm not using either. I'm only using the Unity engine, so I can delete the other two namespaces. So I'm going to save this, pop back over to Unity, and there's different types of you can add a rotation. I think Unity in Action has a rotation added to a cube that's spinning spin.cs. This rotate sky is actually going to be added to the camera because it's the camera that's taken in the Skybox, and I'm not going to add it into the Skybox itself. So I'm going to collapse to FPC and select the main camera, and I can add component. So I can just go ahead and drag this script to main camera, or I can add component, and already typed in rotate. So rotate sky and add that. So here you can see rotate speed. I set it at 1.5. So what I was talking about by having a variable be public, that it becomes available in the inspector. So if this was a private variable, this would not show up. This field would not be available. I wouldn't be, I could not change the settings for the speed of rotation. So I'll leave it at 1.5 and check if it's working. And it is. Okay, great. We have a rotating sky. I'll stop that. We can, let's see, make it 10 and see what happens. Okay. So you imagine if you're in a VR space or something like that, this might make somebody dizzy, but just wanted to see. So I'm going to set it back to 1.5. Actually, that's pretty, maybe I'll go to 2. Save it and just want to see what that looks like. All right, a little fast. So these are all things that one can play with. All right, so I'm setting it back to 1.5, and I'll next step, I think I want to start working on terrain.